Welcome to Strictly Facts, a guide to Caribbean history and culture, hosted by me, Alexandria Miller. Strictly Facts teaches the history, politics, and activism of the Caribbean and connects these themes to contemporary music and popular culture. Wanton listeners, I am so excited to have you back for another episode. Happy Strictly Facts Wednesday. Over the course of Strictly Facts, we've mentioned a number of important individuals here and there, but we haven't been able to talk about them significantly. So I figured what better way to highlight, celebrate, and commemorate these individuals and their contributions to Caribbean history than through a continued series that we're calling Big People Tings. For our first Big People Tings feature, we're highlighting someone familiar to Strictly Facts. So hopefully you listened to our last episode. If not, go back and listen and come back here. We'll be talking about the life and legacy of Guyanese-born international activist, scholar, and historian, Dr. Walter Rodney. Born on March 23, 1942, Walter Anthony Rodney was born in Georgetown in what was formerly known as British Guiana. After high school, he won a scholarship to attend the University of the West Indies at Mona in Jamaica, where he studied history and graduated in 1963. Rodney's interest in history persisted throughout his life, as he went on to pursue a PhD in African history from the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. His research focused on documenting the effects of colonialism and slavery in the Caribbean as well as Africa. Rodney completed his dissertation in 1966 entitled A History of the Upper Guinea Coast, 1545 to 1800, as a sort of corrective history on what is presently parts of Guinea moving south to Sierra Leone. He sought to have this dissertation, and I quote, paint a picture of Upper Guinea society in the mid-16th century, while it was still free of profound European influence, end quote. A history of the Upper Guinea coast was later published in 1970 as one of Rodney's 6 books during his lifetime. Influenced from his upbringing, Rodney's scholarship and activism as a Marxist also amplified the voices and concerns of underrepresented groups. He rallied for those from working class backgrounds and often spoke and wrote about the dangers of capitalism and white supremacy, even at one point connecting issues of race and racism across the world in one of his most popular books, Groundings with My Brothers, from which he wrote, and I quote, "The West Indies and the American South share the dubious distinction of being the breeding ground for world racialism. Even the Blacks became convinced of their own inferiority, though fortunately, we are capable of the most intense expressions when we recognize that we have been duped by the white men. Black power recognizes both the reality of Black oppression and self-negation, as well as the potential for revolt." End quote. Rodney played a critical role in the Black Power movement in the Caribbean and was openly critical about the middle class. His activism and research led him across the world. He was a professor at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania and later at the University of the West Indies at Mona, his alma mater. There, he gave speeches and worked with underrepresented groups like the Rastafari in Jamaica. In 1968, however, his efforts were seen as a problem to the Jamaican government, then led by Prime Minister Hugh Scherer, and he was banned from ever returning to Jamaica on October 15, 1968. Rodney played such a critical role in the development of local Jamaican political consciousness that his banning sparked the Rodney Riots a day later, a series of protests and demonstrations taking place in Kingston that started with university students and then later spread to the general public, marching to the Prime Minister's residence and the Parliament in protest. Dr. Rodney then returned to Tanzania, where he continued to work at the university and with the local underrepresented groups. It was during this time that he published his most well-known book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, in 1972. This book was one of the first to challenge the dominant narrative of Africa's underdevelopment, and it documents at length Europe's role in exploiting the continent, obstructing its economic, social, and political advancement. Rodney eventually returned to Guyana in 1974 and helped found political party, the Working People's Alliance, after the University of Guyana withdrew their offer for a teaching position. Rodney worked with a number of activists with the WPA, including Guyanese feminist activist and intellectual Andaye, who recently passed away in 2019. Together, the organization worked to combat the growing dictatorial leadership of the People's National Congress, or PNC, then led by Forbes Burnham. As Christine and I discussed in our last episode, Guyana faced some division along racial and ethnic lines between its Afro and Indo-Guyanese populations. Rodney and the WPA worked to bridge these divisions and promote class solidarity, with Rodney even believing that, and I quote, "If you organize separately, this may well be construed by each group as something exclusive and hostile," end quote. Rodney and the WPA were as a result seen as major threats to the PNC, and they were subject to severe harassment and even tried on trumped-up charges for arson in 1979. Sadly, on June 13, 1980, Rodney was assassinated in Georgetown, Guyana via a car bomb. Despite passing away at the young age of 38, his legacy continues to live on through his writing and his years of activism, as well as through numerous lectures, foundations, and places named in his honor. Oyago! Stay tuned for Strictly Facts Sounds, where we connect our history to pop culture. For this episode's Strictly Facts Sounds segment, first we have renowned Bayesian poet Kamau Brathwaite's 1981 piece entitled Poem for Walter Rodney, which eloquently connects the parts of Rodney's life in verse by tracing many of the places he visited and all that he stood for. We also have Jamaican dub poet Linton Kwesi Johnson's song Reggae for Rodney, which does something similar to Kamau Brathwaite's piece, with Johnson singing, "And all at him diwan was for setting people free." In addition, Rodney's importance to the Black struggle, and especially to Rastafarian beliefs, has made him the subject and are referenced in countless songs, both new and old, especially in reggae music. He is the subject of Carl Dawkins' 1970 song entitled Dr. Rodney, Lou Lemke's song named after him, and Corey Harris's 2007 song of the same name. Rodney is also referenced in recent songs like Chronix's 2017, Black is Beautiful, and Protege's 2013 song, The 8-Year Affair, as well as his 2018 song featuring Chronix, Flames. Walter Rodney's story and contributions are an important part of our history as well as our future. And if you're interested in learning more, feel free to check out our Strictly Facts syllabus, where we have links to all the music and countless readings by and about Walter Rodney's life and activism. I hope you enjoyed our very first Big People Tings. Little more. Thanks for tuning in to Strictly Facts. Visit strictlyfactspodcast.com for more information from each episode. Follow us at Strictly Facts Pod on Instagram and Facebook, and at Strictly Facts PD on Twitter.